Next up, I'll ask you to please welcome Marcus, as we will be talking about from code to community.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Hey, gang shit.
All right. Hey, welcome everybody. Thank you all so much for being here. I just want to say we're incredibly lucky to be joined today on stage by this all-star panel. A lot of these people, or all of these people up here with us today, are Near OGs. They've been contributing to or building on Near for well over a year, some 2+. So in this panel, we're going to be diving into the intertwined journey of technical development and community cultivation in Web3. As you probably all know, I mean, the impact of a successful community, in Web3 is pretty much, it's massive. So who better to discuss this topic than this diverse, this panel full of people with diverse backgrounds. So I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves, provide a little overview of what you're working on, what you do, and we can dive into it. Naomi, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm Naomi, and I'm, as you can see, the only one who doesn't have like a project on there, because I'm a freelancer mostly. I work at the Asta Foundation, but I've been in the NEAR ecosystem for roughly a year. And last NEARCON, nobody knew me, and now everybody thinks I work for the foundation, so I must have done something right. And yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'm quite fond of the community topic and looking forward to talking about it.
Me next. Hi guys, I'm Reza from Ludero. Ludero is a gamified Web3 market intelligence platform. We use games to collect zero-party data from your users and help you make better decisions.
Hello, does this work? Oh, lit. My name is Shot. Some of y'all know me as Web3 Plug. I lead decentralization at Banyan Collective, which is essentially the US arm of NEAR. And yeah, I work with devs, DAOs, and founders. I also run Minority Programmers. We're an international group of devs. You might see some of our products here in the NEAR ecosystem.
Hello, my name is Dan. I'm the co-founder of Apollo 42, the third NFT marketplace, largest NFT marketplace on Near. Right now, we have a pivot, which is A42 Lab, laboratory building mass adoption products, focusing on mass adoption products, and also providing B2B solutions. We worked with companies like BMW Europe, Datoo, Japanese agency, and right now creating a whole new product, a mobile application, Spotium, that is focused on the intersection between augmented reality and the whole Web3 space.
Cool. Yeah, awesome to be up here with all of you. Feel honored. I want to start with a question, right? Like it's almost like the chicken and the egg. And I love your unique kind of approaches to this. What comes first, the community or the project? A lot of times we see a team build out a project and then they start focusing on building community around it. Other times, probably more often, we see people, building community around a concept. What are your opinions there?
Okay, I can start maybe. So I think community is great, right? But I believe that the real strong community is organically created community, right? Created usually by some true believers in the product, the platform, a protocol. We have plenty of use cases in the Web3 space. So like moderation and stuff is important, but when the real engagement comes from the real people. So if you have like moderators and your employees chatting with with each other and talking to each other in the community, that's not how it works. Unless you want to essentially create pump and dump token on or show some stats to venture capitalists, how many users you have in your Discord community, right? But yeah, so it depends. But for me and from our side of view, the real community is essentially community created by true members of the whole protocol or project. Yeah.
I mean, for me, it really depends on what the community is and what it attends to achieve. Often, when developing a product, I think the most critical thing you should do is address paid points directly. If you're already existing community, that might be the inspiration for your paid point. But at the same time, a community doesn't necessarily need a product at all. We work a lot in like the near ecosystem in general. That's not necessarily kind of doing this type of eco relations product oriented. But certain communities, like for example, like the boss community, we needed like a developer tooling, so we teamed up with Jutsu to build that out. That's the example of like essentially a product coming out of a community based on pain points. At the same time, communities may never need a product, or they realize, or they're just there to kind of hang out. So I really am kind of skeptical about projects that build the community first rather than address a pain point. I really think most effective projects come from addressing a pain point in a segment and kind of going to the places where those communities exist.
Yeah, and like to your point, we've seen like we always kind of make the joke of like there's 12 active users in Web3 because I think of all the focus on community rather than the focus on product. But as like you say, if you're addressing a pain point and then the community can kind of grow from that naturally, and you get word of mouth and people tell each other stuff. Like we're building decentralized system, but information still flow in the same ways. So yeah, product first, and then community. If you're building a business, if you're just trying to do something else, then it doesn't really matter what the product is.
Yeah, I don't think actually everything in Web3 is like worth a business or can even be commercialized. And a lot of times projects build the community to kind of dump on them, which obviously then is not a great way to go about it. I think another way to build a community can also just be you have some aspirational goal, you have some shared values, and you want to do something cool. Like, I don't know, you want to make an anime together, or you want to see like a certain type of art be created, and then you come together. Like, I mean, in the Near ecosystem, there's NEARCON DAO, and it's just a bunch of artists making like cute art of this one thing. And it's a community, there's no token, there's no nothing like that, and it works. People are having fun, and it's small. I think that's also another like challenge. Everybody wants to scale super fast and go from their community from like 10 people to 100 to 1,000 to 1,000,000 in like really short time. And I think you usually lose like the initial culture when you do that.
Yeah, I also think it's important to understand what a product is. Often when you're doing a community without a business model, there's a lot of operational overhead. There's a lot of someone who's actually onboarding someone, or you have kind of a decentralized way of like creating an onboarding checklist or a user journey for community members. But that's the product in itself. But a lot of times when you have kind of that operational overhead and you don't have a business model, the community dies and leaves without that person. And so I think it's also kind of important to understand like who in the community is providing that onboarding process, what kind of that onboarding product to the community is, and and how to exactly sustain that.
So yeah, the answer is it depends, Marcus, and it's always better to build a product first. I believe everyone agrees here.
Yep.
Not always.
Something I want to address, just I guess it's relatable to the group here as well. But with the open open source nature of Web3, Web3 is a space where a bunch of like awesome people are building towards the future of an open web, user-owned assets, user-owned data. An active developer community and presence is super important. But this seems to be one of the biggest pain points in Web3, right? Is kind of how do you effectively build an engaged community of developers that can contribute to the protocol or the project, and also provide like input from a technical standpoint, but also ensure that they're retained. Like, I'd love to hear from some of you with each of your respective kind of backgrounds and roles that you bring to the table. what some like creative kind of methods around this could be, or what you've seen that worked, and then kind of what your thoughts on, like, what would you do, what would you implement to kind of get something like this going?
I mean, I do a lot of like developer relations work, especially in a decentralized way, even before the near ecosystem, working at the minority programmers. And it really depends on what the objective of what you're trying to achieve. So for minority programmers, initially, we just want to skill people across all the world to actually have upward mobility through development. And this, for us, is how do we effectively equip them with the skills so that they can get a job. That developer journey is very different than having someone retained in the near ecosystem and doing DevRel for that. So particularly what I think is most effective, especially with kind of breaking down the numbers in the developer report for full-time developers, which is what I want to see in the ecosystem, is actual outside of like these hackathons and just builder groups and touch points there, how exactly can we find them full-time opportunities? And a lot of times this doesn't, a lot of the time this trickles down to like what projects are effectively getting funded, if we could pipeline developers into the founder journey and continue it there. At the same time, I think an open source culture where people are excited to innovate and constantly innovating, not only on the front end, but at the protocol level, is kind of inherently needed for building a robust kind of near ecosystem. But at the same time, you see this in like Rust, and a lot of times, a lot of the contributors there are also contributing because in their day job, they happen to be dependent on Rust for a lot of the infrastructure tooling they're building. So to me, that's pivotal, making sure that there are companies who are building on Near that are dependent on this open source infrastructure, and that are kind of pipelining junior and senior developers into contributing to the overall protocol.
Yeah, I can add some thoughts. Is nowadays we have like the biggest developer communities in crypto in the Web3 space are Gitcoin community, I believe, and developer DAO. We have also like projects She256, I believe, nonprofit organization focused on developers. But the main issue there is the issue of the whole Web3 space, is we separate each other from other chains. So even if you are in this community, there are still sub-communities that are working on only one, layer 2, or help this layer to succeed, the protocol, smart contract, etc. It doesn't matter. So I believe the next stage for developer communities is to go multi-chain. And that's exactly, Marcus, what I had like 2-3 days ago. I told you about multi-chain protocol concept, and you said, just wait a minute, then relax, Ilya will say everything. And we had an announcement about this multi-chain thing, and Polygon announced. So I think this is the future, and this is the first step, of course. And that's amazing. So in terms of developer community, we have Near Dev Hub, we have other also small developer communities, and we have to focus on building multi-chain infrastructure, multi-chain protocols, because the future is multi-chain, basically.
I think maybe, I mean, I'm a marketer, and what I feel is like we are always just like focusing on such a small pie. And I mean, developers want to build for like people in the end, right? I mean, okay, some of them want to build because it's just cool to build and it's fun. But I mean, if you look at Web3, it's so small. Like Roblox probably has like 10 times as many monthly active users as Web3. So if you want to like make money and maybe also get your work out to a big audience, then maybe that's where you go. And I think that's like a bigger problem in the space, is that and everybody's been saying that we have too much infrastructure now and we kind of lack the consumer apps, and now we've got this focus. So maybe once we actually get to the point where we have more consumer apps, then it also gets more attractive to build on Web3 in general. And of course I agree, like multi-chain, but also it shouldn't be so hard, right? Like it's like Solidity, then there's like Rust, there's Wasm, there's like whatnot. And even like if a chain like Solana has Rust, but if you want to write Rust smart contracts on Solana, it's a very different beast than writing Rust smart contracts on Near. So I think there's still a lot of like things that can be improved to actually make this multi-chain dev experience easier and maybe also possible.
Yeah, I think like, just focusing like for better or for worse, people are focusing on developers, but kind of like non-technical entrepreneurs are probably being overlooked a little bit, that have ideas and just need a bit of help bringing it to market and on the coding side. And I think that would be a very interesting way for whichever blockchain decides to pursue that opportunity.
Actually, on that note, I think the current move with AI is really interesting because even people like me, who've got no clue of coding, they can figure out how to build like a POC at least of something that somewhat works without having to know like, I mean, I have some basic understanding of all these things, but you can do it. So I think maybe if some communities figure out how they can empower people who are non-technical to do those things and teach them like, hey, look, this is how you need to phrase it, and then you can get to a stage where you can actually show it to somebody and they might have some constructive feedback.
Yeah, and I want to note that, like, especially in the Near ecosystem, unlike the kind of other siloed like developer ecosystems, it's like we have Rust, which is one of the fastest growing languages. We have JavaScript on the front ends. We have the exposure through Solidity, and yeah, I think it's like I think it's very kind of important to note, like, when we're training kind of engineering talent, they're not siloed to our ecosystem alone. This is skills that can lead to overall upward mobility. I think we have that really unique selling proposition as opposed to Solidity and Ethereum. People are kind of like, if they're kind of siloed into that ecosystem, and so that's one of the main things I like about Near, and even on the Rust frameworks kind of alone, it's way easier than chewing glass on Solano, on Cosmos, or on Polkadot, is from what I've been hearing, just kind of from developer feedback.
Well, I'd love to actually segue from there and kind of like build on top of that, right? So, I mean, you know, Web3 right now, like this, what determines the success of any Web3 project? And like a lot of these people here might be building something really cool that they want to turn into a project later on, or they've already been building something. So we all know it is community, right? So, for instance, all of us probably subscribe to Netflix, but do you consider yourself a Netflix community member? Like in Web3, it's all about community. So, again, to kind of like build on that topic, what are some of the challenges that that some teams can expect to face in harmonizing, like, you know, technical development? It's like building a project while, you know, kind of trying to make sure that they ramp up community engagement.
I believe that, you know, this thesis that Web3 as a community, I think we should get rid of it, to be honest, because yes, Web3 community is a part of Web3, very big part, but if we're talking about the projects, protocols, products, the main stats should be users, right? Not total value locked, not how many community members you have, users, right? Monthly active users, daily active users, etc. Because the example is, you know, Sandbox, the game, they have like dozens of thousands of community members, very active. How many monthly active users they have? Around 4K. So it doesn't tell a lot of things. Yes, these people want to get some benefits from interacting, you know, with each other and get some reward for that. You know how Discord communities work, right? But still, we need to focus on users first and attracting users, not community members.
Well, I think it depends on what you're building. Like, for example, take Near Social. I mean, to be honest, I don't use it much because I think it's not as great as other decentralized social networks. But what I've seen, for example, when using Farcaster is what they managed is that the initial community they seeded was like really high quality, and everybody kind of had a shared understanding of what is like socially acceptable in this context and what isn't. And there was a lot of alpha as well. So if you were there, you would usually get some news early. And now they're scaling it up. But I think if you have a product like that that lives from the community interactions, then you definitely should focus on building that community. Or if you have, I mean, some NFT projects, depending on how they structure it, they might want to get a lot of input from their community, right? And maybe they want to have like a collaborative thing, because I think that's like one of the main propositions of Web3 is that we can align incentives, we can work on stuff together, we don't have to be as cutthroat, which, I mean, we're not there yet, but...
Yeah, can I add something?
Yeah.
I totally agree, Naomi, with you, because, you know, but I speak from the product's point of view, you speak from the community point of view, right? So, and I totally agree, but we have to keep in mind that it depends on the user conversion from the community to the product, right? If you have like hundreds of thousands of community members that are interacting with each other and have just 2K monthly active users in the product, doesn't work like this, right?
Yeah.
it's a failed project essentially. But it depends how you really attract those community members to really use your product, and that's the essential task for you as a head of product or someone from the product itself.
Of course, unless you use your community to sell your token to, and if all these people buy your token and your measure is like, how high can I pump my token, then it might still be a success.
But that's a bad way of doing things,
Yeah,
right?
of course, it's a bad thing, but I still think it's like 70% of the projects at the moment,
I mean,
which obviously has to change. But
I think they're completely like kind of different personas. I mean, a token holder is not a user, and a user is not necessarily customer.
Yeah.
And I think in Web3 we overhype community. And when you look at the overall near community, how many people are actually using the protocol on chain? Everybody on my team, I have all their wallets. I have the Learn Near Watchbot wallet. I track exactly what applications they're interacting with, and yeah, completely. If they're putting on here, I literally will walk up to them and show their transaction hash, because I want to make sure that everybody on my team is actually, especially as ecosystem practitioners, are using the projects on Near. I think there is also a disconnect between kind of the biggest, like, I don't necessarily know if if Ludero users are also using my applications too. I think when it comes to community in Web3, as a product founder, I think it's very important that we understand kind of how in the ecosystem this community translates into user retention across applications. Otherwise, they're just kind of people there to hype, and they're actually not using the core product. And to me, one of the most valuable things the community can do is provide like user feedback and help us actually develop a more meaningful product.
I mean, take the example of like Near's a great example, right? We have Kaiching and Sweat, 2 out of 5 of the most active users, active dApps in Web3. But they're not really part of like the Near community, right? They're sending transactions through, but they're not active on Twitter. They're not. I guess the majority of them aren't active on Twitter or Discord, but there's still value being driven to the chain, right? So like you said, Shot, like about different personas and like where they're driving value, and ultimately you have to ask yourself is like, where's the end goal in that customer journey, and what does good retention look like? Does it mean them coming over to Twitter and degenning spaces with us and like buying like crappy NFTs, or is it just like using the tech under the hood and driving value to the chain that way?
I want to add to Reza's words. I think Near has a reverse problem because we have so many transactions accounts being created, but we don't really have as big as community as
exactly.
Depending on the transaction, quantity of transactions and stuff. So that's actually a very good thought. So we have in Near ecosystem has a reverse problem because we need to create community to essentially make products and board people to products. But as Ilya and Near Foundation and Near Protocol works on the fact that users should not really see what's the protocol they're building. Most of the users in the Near ecosystem, they don't know that they're using Near, and that's the whole point. So we need to work on the community side of things too, right? So we create more products and projects.
But even that in itself, I think, is a product like pain point. So we have all these transactions on chain, but we don't necessarily know what level of the progressive onboarding process they are. A lot of these wallets are made on behalf of users. They can export, but we as the ecosystem have not trickled that down there. I think wallets, about a Quest, a bunch of kind of onboarding infrastructure could be put in place so we do accrue that value. But I think like overall that strategy needs to be developed, because the fact of the matter is like building products that are very near native where the user owns their seed phrase, we're not getting the benefits of Sweat and Kaching. And so that's just some things we need to strategize.
That's why we need to track every employee's wallet to really understand the activity of the Near ecosystem.
Well, definitely important to like dog food the ecosystem and make sure that kind of things that are being built in any ecosystem are actually being used, by the kind of like core contributors. We have about 5 minutes left, so I kind of want to end this off on. We have, everybody up here has a very important kind of. They bring a really unique element to this topic, right? For instance, like Naomi, you have your own community behind you that you've built. I mean, you have a crazy following that's very engaged, a big following on Twitter. Like your Twitter spaces are popping off. Shot, you have like done amazing work in the Near ecosystem, curating, developer communities, vertical communities. You're on top of a lot of things. So I would love to hear from all of you. What advice would you give to these amazing people here today that are building projects to foster like a vibrant ecosystem while advancing their technical goals?
I would say, is your community going to last if you die? That's one of the things I kind of really worry about. A lot of times, especially in these ecosystems, like a lot leaves with the person. There's time for onboarding. I think you have to design a robust ecosystem with a bunch of stewards and align incentives from the beginning, because and this even happens for a lot of projects building. Like, you'll build something because it's cool, but you never had an inherent business model. I think community incentives are along the same lines. And I've spent a lot of times, I made a lot of mistakes in my past and even today, where I'm hustling and bustling, but I didn't build something that scales. So I think that should be the biggest priority. Or this is what I say often, like, you may feel like you have motion, but you're really running up a wall and getting nowhere. Yeah, keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think ask yourself, like, honestly and genuinely, like, why should anybody care? And why should anybody, if somebody has like 30 minutes a day, why should they join my community when they could be joining like any other community? And that's not an answer that you're going to get like pretty quickly. It's going to take over time. You're going to have to get feedback and engage with your community. But just being really critical of what you offer, where you stand in relation to the market, will help you make better insights.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the community that I guess Marcus is referring to, that's behind me, that's mostly just based on vibes and being very honest with my opinions and high integrity. And people value that, especially in a space where everybody is moving on to the next hype thing so fast, just in order to like grab a few more people from here and from there. And I think, yeah, I mean, sometimes humans aren't just motivated by money, they are also very much motivated by just hanging out with cool people. So I think if you start your initial community with the kind of people you would love to spend the entire weekend with, no phones, no nothing, like, that's, I think, a good start, because if you have an organic, very active, like, community that maybe even rallies behind your product, I think then, yeah, even if you grow fast, they'll make sure that still the initial culture remains. And yeah, so I think vibes are very important.
Win proof of vibes.
Yeah, proof of vibes.
Cool. Dan, anything to say? Any advice?
I think these guys know about community building much more than I do. So
Well, I mean, you've been around. You've built
I
some
agree to everyone
awesome communities. Yeah, well, it's been great hearing from you. I'm completely honored to share the stage with all you amazing people. Hopefully you got some value out of that. But yeah, let's give a round of applause for this amazing panel, everybody.